Laura receives $10,000 from her parents for the kids' school expenses, but her husband steals every penny to send his mother on a luxury Turkey vacation. "Ask your parents for more money," the heartless words from her callous husband. While Laura suffers from losing her children's funds, Mark coldly declares, "My mom needs rest. The kids can wear cheap clothes from the market." But when Mark returns home the next day, he's left absolutely stunned by the unbelievable scene. Empty house, a single letter, and a court lawsuit waiting for him. What did Laura do that made Mark completely collapse? This breathtaking revenge will leave you glued to the screen. And before we continue, write in the comments from which country you're watching the video, and also check if you're subscribed to the channel, as I share interesting life stories with you every day. Okay, let's enjoy the story. Laura stared at her phone screen, warmth spreading through her chest. $10,000. Help for getting the kids ready for school from her parents, deposited into her personal account with a clear note for Ethan and Sophia. She traced her finger over the screen, as if trying to touch those numbers, feel their weight. A kaleidoscope of images flashed in her mind. New backpacks, colorful pencil cases, stacks of textbooks, gym clothes, comfortable shoes, and even extracurriculars. Ethan had long dreamed of robotics class, and Sophia fantasized about dance lessons. All of it required money, and Laura knew that better than anyone. She sighed, leaning back in the kitchen chair. How tired she was of this endless race for survival. Constant scrimping, denying herself everything, working to exhaustion just to make ends meet. Yes, Mark worked, but his salary barely covered utilities and food. Everything else fell on her shoulders. Side gigs, freelancing, help from her parents. She spun like a squirrel in a wheel, dreaming only of one thing to ensure her kids lacked for nothing. This help from Grace and Robert was like a breath of fresh air. Not that they hadn't helped before, but lately Laura tried to accept it as rarely as possible. She craved independence, wanted to prove to everyone, and most of all to herself, that she could manage. But sometimes circumstances were stronger than she was. She recalled the conversation with her mom a few weeks ago. Grace had asked at length about school preparations, about future plans. Laura reluctantly shared her struggles, trying not to complain. But a mother's heart isn't fooled. Grace understood everything and offered help. "Sweetie, I see how hard it is for you," she said then. "Don't refuse our help. We want the grandkids to have everything. It's for them, you know?" Laura had stayed silent for a long time, holding back tears. She felt ashamed that she couldn't provide her kids with a decent future. But at the same time, she felt immense gratitude to her parents for their love and support. Now, looking at that money in her account, she felt a mix of emotions: joy, relief, gratitude, and a slight pang of guilt. Guilt for not being able to handle it alone. She opened her notebook and started listing essential purchases. Uniforms, 2 sets each, so there's always a clean one. Shoes, everyday, indoor, gym, fall boots. School supplies, notebooks, pens, pencils, paints, sketchbooks. The list grew by the minute. Then she added payments for extracurriculars, robotics for Ethan, it was his dream, and dance for Sophia. She loved moving to the music so much. Laura imagined how the kids' eyes would light up when they found out. She smiled, anticipating their joy. This money wasn't just digits on a screen. It was her children's dreams, their future. And she'd do everything possible to make those dreams real. That evening, when Mark came home from work, Laura decided to share the news. She waited eagerly, picturing his delight. Mark entered the apartment tired and irritated. He tossed his bag on the floor and headed to the kitchen, where Laura had already set the table. "Something wrong?" she asked, noticing his scowl. "Nothing special," Mark grumbled. Boss nitpicking again. Sick of these reports. Laura sighed. She knew Mark hated his job. But what could they do? No other options in sight. "I've got good news for you," she said, trying to sound upbeat. "My parents helped with school prep. They transferred $10,000. Mark frowned. "Why?" he asked. "I work. I bring in money." Laura tried to explain. "Mark, you know how expensive everything is now. This will cover the essentials. Uniforms, shoes, supplies, extracurriculars." Mark cut her off. "Extracurriculars can wait. Main thing is to clothe and shoe them. Extras are just spoiling. Laura felt irritation rising inside. It's not spoiling, Mark. It's their development. Ethan dreams of robotics. Sophia, of dance. Well, they'll dream and get over it. Mark brushed it off. No need to pamper kids. Laura barely held back her anger. I'm not canceling anything, she said firmly. This is money for the kids, and I'll decide how to spend it. Mark looked at her defiantly. Maybe I know better how to spend money? He asked. Laura stared at him silently, unable to believe her ears. Was he really saying this? Did he not understand how hard it was for her? This is my parents' money, Mark, she said quietly. They gave it specifically for the kids, and I won't let you spend it on something else. Mark shrugged. We'll see, he said, turning away. She finished her dinner in silence, avoiding his gaze. Thoughts swirled in her head about upcoming purchases, the kids' activities, the new life she dreamed of creating for them. Laura felt a slight twinge of anxiety as she pulled her phone from her pocket. Unknown number. Usually only work or Ethan's school called. She answered, holding the phone with her shoulder while rummaging in her bag for keys. It was the bank. An automated voice politely informed her that the entire sum, $10,000, had just been transferred from her account. Laura froze on the doorstep, as if doused in ice water. What sum? What transfer? Raced through her mind. She mechanically inserted the key but couldn't turn it. Her hands shook. Entering the apartment, she immediately called the bank, explaining the situation. The operator, after checking, confirmed the withdrawal and provided recipient details. Mark Johnson, the voice said dryly. The world spun around Laura. Mark, the one who grumbled yesterday about expensive kids' activities, the one who promised support and understanding. She dropped her bag on the floor and, without removing her coat, went to the living room. Mark sat on the couch, glued to his phone. Empty chip bags and a half-drunk beer bottle littered the coffee table. Mark, she called quietly, trying to stay calm. The bank just called. $10,000 withdrawn from my account. Do you know anything about it? Mark looked up, gave her an indifferent glance, and shrugged. Yeah, me. So what? Laura felt a wave of outrage building. So what, Mark? That was money my parents gave for the kids, for school, for activities. Where did you send it? Mark set down his phone and yawned. Bought Mom a trip to Turkey. She's dreamed of it forever. Laura was stunned. She couldn't believe her ears. You spent money meant for our kids on a trip for your mom without telling me, knowing it was targeted funds? So what? Mom's tired. She needs a rest. And the kids? They can get cheaper stuff. Uniforms on sale, sneakers from the market. They'll be fine. His words stung like a slap. Humiliation burned inside Laura. She recalled years devoted to the family, endless compromises, her own forgotten dreams, how she denied herself everything so the kids lacked nothing, and now it was all trampled by his irresponsible act. How did you get my card details? Laura asked, trying to speak calmly, though everything boiled inside. You know, I use your phone sometimes when mine's dead. Once saw you entering them to pay bills. Noted it down, Mark tossed casually. Laura felt utterly drained. He didn't even bother hiding his deceit. He just took what he wanted, without thinking of consequences. Do you realize what you've done? She whispered, looking him straight in the eyes. This money, it wasn't just money. It was hope, a chance to give our kids what we never had. You took that from them. Oh, come on, why the yelling? Mark snapped. Ask your folks for more. They've got plenty, won't go broke. In that moment, something broke inside Laura. It was the last straw. She couldn't anymore. Couldn't tolerate his immaturity, his selfishness, his disrespect. She couldn't live in this humiliation. You know what, Mark? She said quietly, staring into his eyes. I won't ask my parents for anything else. I won't ask you for anything else. Mark raised his eyebrows in surprise. Who needs you? Laura didn't answer. She just turned and went to the bedroom. Her heart pounded wildly. She felt as if a heavy burden had been lifted. Fear was there, fear of the unknown, the future, loneliness. But that fear was nothing compared to the suffocation she felt beside Mark. Fragments of conversations with friends, with her mom, flashed in her head. They all said the same. Stop enduring, you deserve better. But she'd always found excuses for Mark. Told herself he'd change, things would improve. But nothing changed, and it didn't get better. Laura pulled a folder of documents from the desk drawer. Birth certificates for Ethan and Sophia, marriage certificate, household registry extract. She took a blank sheet and began writing a statement. A statement for divorce. Her hands trembled, but she wrote firmly and confidently. Each word came hard, but she knew it was necessary. The only way out. Finishing the statement, Laura sat on the bed and closed her eyes. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She cried from hurt, disappointment, pain. But at the same time, she felt relief. She'd finally decided. She wouldn't let anyone humiliate her anymore. She'd be the master of her own life. At that moment, Mark entered the room. He stood in the doorway, arms crossed, looking at her with contempt. "So, what are you doing here?" he asked, smirking. "Planning to leave?" "Yeah. Who needs you besides me? Who'd take you with 2 kids?" Laura lifted her tear-stained eyes to him. No fear left, only resolve. "My kids need me," she replied in a firm voice. "And I'll prove to them you can be happy even alone. As for you, Mark, I hope you realize what you've lost." Mark didn't yet grasp what happened. He thought she was bluffing. He was used to Laura always forgiving him, but this time it was different. That evening, Mark came home anticipating the familiar smell of fresh brewed coffee and the quiet chatter of kids prepping for school. Instead, a ringing silence greeted him. The apartment felt empty and alien, like a stage set where he'd forgotten his lines. "Laura, kids," he called, uncertainly, moving deeper inside. The answer was silence, oppressive and ominous. On the kitchen table, he spotted a folded sheet of paper. His heart clenched painfully. He recognized Laura's neat handwriting. His hands shook as he unfolded the letter. The text was dry and formal, like a protocol excerpt. Laura didn't pour out her soul, allowed no reproaches or justifications. She just stated facts. "Mark," the letter began, "due to your decision to dispose of funds intended for our children's education and my disagreement with it, I've decided on temporary residence with the kids at my mother's. On the table, you'll find copies of documents confirming the targeted purpose of the transferred funds, plus a bank statement. The lawyer has prepared an official demand for return of the sum within 5 days. Otherwise, we'll be forced to go to court." Mark set the letter aside and grabbed the other papers. Copies of bank docs confirming the transfer from Grace with a note for the kids, a statement showing the full withdrawal, and worst of all, a notice of intent to file for divorce and a statement on temporary child residence with the mother. He felt the ground slip away. Divorce. Laura had really gone through with it. He'd always seen her as too soft, too dependent for such a step. He was wrong. Panic flooded him. He tried calling Laura, but her phone was off. He called again and again, hearing only the monotonous subscriber temporarily unavailable. In desperation, he dialed Evelyn. "Mom, big trouble." "Laura left," he muttered, trying to hide the tremor in his voice. "What do you mean left? Where?" Evelyn shrieked. Mark briefly recounted, downplaying his role. He omitted the money spent on her trip, painting it as Laura's sudden whim. "She's just hysterical," Evelyn fumed. "Ignore it, she'll come back. Where's she going with 2 kids? Without you, she's nothing." But Mark sensed this was serious. In Laura's voice, when she spoke of divorce, there was no hesitation, no doubt, only steel. Evelyn kept spewing venom at Laura, accusing her of ingratitude and greed. Mark half listened, sinking into despair. He knew he'd done something stupid, but admitting it even to himself was beyond him. "Listen, Mom. Not now," he interrupted finally. "I need to figure out what to do next." "What to do? Get her back," Evelyn insisted. "You're a man or what? Show her who's boss." Mark hung up and slumped into a chair. Boss? Yeah, he'd always seen himself as the boss here. But now he was alone in an empty apartment, without his wife, without kids, facing a court battle. Laura sat in a small room at her mother Grace's apartment. The kids, Ethan and Sophia, played engrossingly on the rug, unaware of the storm in their parents' lives. Laura watched them, her heart filling with pain and hope. She felt guilty for shattering their familiar world, but knew there was no other way. Grace entered with 2 cups of tea. "How are you, sweetie?" she asked, sitting beside Laura. "Fine, Mom," Laura replied, forcing a smile. Everything will be okay. Grace took her hand. I know it's hard now, she said, but you're strong, you'll manage. We'll all help. Laura felt a lump in her throat. She hugged her mom, tears rolling down her cheeks. Thanks, Mom, she whispered, for everything. That same day, Laura met her lawyer, Jessica. Jessica was a young, energetic woman who instilled confidence and hope in Laura. So, Laura, Jessica said, we're filing to recover the misused funds from Mark, also submitting for divorce and setting father-child contact rules. Any special wishes? I want the kids to see their dad, Laura replied, but only with me or my mom present. I don't trust him. Fine, Jessica said. We'll note that. And Laura, think about property division. Joint apartment? Car? Laura sighed. Property division seemed so dirty and humiliating, but she knew it was necessary. I'll think about it, Jessica, she said. Thanks for your help. That evening, with the kids asleep, Laura sat in the kitchen drinking tea. The doorbell rang. She opened it to a courier with a package. For Mark, the courier said, handing it over. Laura took it and closed the door. The package read, Lawsuit claim. She knew this was the start of a new chapter in her life, one where she'd write her own story. She placed the kids' backpacks in the hallway, ready for tomorrow. New day, new life. Laura lived with her parents. Ethan and Sophia seemed to adapt quickly to the new setup. Grace always had time for her grandkids, reading bedtime stories, baking pies, helping with homework. Laura watched them, feeling the gripping fear slowly recede. Yes, it was hard. Yes, the future seemed foggy. But her kids were there, worth living and fighting for. She sat at the kitchen table, reviewing docs from the lawyer. Divorce, property division, father-child contact rules. It all seemed complex and scary. But Laura knew it was necessary, the only way to break free from dependency and humiliation. She signed all needed docs and sent them back to Jessica. After that, she felt a bit lighter, like another step toward freedom. Meanwhile, Mark received a court summons. He sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by things that no longer brought joy. The place felt empty and cold without Laura and the kids. Evelyn, of course, blamed Laura entirely. Said she was ungrateful, didn't appreciate Mark's care, stirred up scandal over some money. But Mark half listened. For the first time in ages, he pondered his actions. He recalled Laura's face when he told her about the trip purchase. Shock, disappointment, pain. He'd seen it all in her eyes, but ignored it then. He was sure she'd forgive. Always support that she was convenient. And now, she was gone. She'd left, taken the kids, filed for divorce. And worst, she demanded the money back. Money he'd spent on his mom's trip without consulting, without considering consequences. Mark realized he'd made a mistake, a huge, unforgivable one. He'd seen Laura as weak, dependent, convenient, but she was stronger than he thought. She'd found the strength to leave, start anew, protect her kids. And what had he done? Destroyed his family? Betrayed his wife's trust? Hurt his children? He tried calling Laura, but she didn't answer. He texted, begged for a meeting, apologized, but in vain. Laura didn't want to see or hear him. Mark sat in his chair, head bowed. He felt crushed, broken, worthless. He'd realized he'd lost the most valuable thing he had, his family. And he alone was to blame. Evelyn kept insisting Laura would return, that she couldn't without him, that she'd just feared hardships. But Mark didn't believe her. He knew Laura wouldn't come back. He'd seen resolve, confidence, strength in her eyes. He knew she wouldn't be convenient anymore. And him? He feared being alone, facing his actions' consequences, losing everything. Laura focused on the kids. She took Ethan to robotics class, Sophia to dance. She saw their eyes glow with joy, how engrossed they were, and it gave her strength, confidence. After classes, they went to the park, bought ice cream, rode the carousel. Laura tried not to think of court, Mark, the future. She wanted to savor the moment, be with her kids, give them love and care. That evening, with the kids asleep, Laura sat in the kitchen with Grace. They sipped tea and talked about everything. You know, honey, Grace said, I always knew you were strong. You just needed time to realize it. Laura smiled. She knew her mom always believed in her, even when she didn't believe in herself. "Thanks, Mom," Laura said, "for everything." "Oh, sweetie," Grace replied. "I'll always be here. Always help." Laura hugged her mom, feeling warm and safe beside her. She knew she wasn't alone, had support, could handle any hardship. She started seeking side work. She needed money to support herself and the kids. Posted ads online, called contacts, went to interviews. It wasn't easy, but she didn't give up. She got offered a job at a small clothing store. Not hard, but time and energy consuming. Laura accepted. She needed the money and was ready to work. She also began seeing a psychologist, needed to sort herself out, understand why she'd endured humiliation so long, how to build new relationships, how to be happy. The psychologist helped her realize her worth, believe in herself, let go of the past. Laura changed gradually, became more confident, independent, happy. She wouldn't be convenient anymore. She decided to live her life, care for her kids, build her future.